Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the difference between osteoporosis and osteopenia. Now, both conditions are quite common for women during their post-menopause years. In fact, the first few years when you actually go into post-menopause, your bone density is at the highest risk of dropping a lot more rapidly than it has done over the rest of your life and may well do into the future. That's not guaranteed, but your early years of post-menopause, your bones are generally at the highest risk of losing their density. So what is the difference between osteoporosis and osteopenia? Osteoporosis is a term you're probably more familiar with than osteopenia, and you're probably more familiar with what that can mean for your bone health in the future for the rest of your life. So I'll start with osteopenia because osteopenia it's almost like the first stage onto osteoporosis. So if you have a diagnosis of osteopenia, it means you've lost some of your bone density to a point where they are becoming weakened. It's not as severe as in osteoporosis, but nonetheless there is a really noticeable drop in your bone density. So if you get a diagnosis of osteopenia, that means that your bones are not quite at the point of osteoporosis, and you can do things to possibly even reverse the condition and get your bone density back up to what is considered a reasonable level for a woman of your age. If you get a diagnosis of osteoporosis, on the other hand, then your bone density has dropped to a point where your bones have actually become weakened and brittle and are more likely to fracture and even break. Although again, it doesn't mean that you can't do something about it. You can actually slow it down and you can actually improve osteoporosis. Of course, your doctor may give you medication for osteoporosis. You may well be offered medication, and even with osteopenia, sometimes you are offered medical help for this. But in both cases of osteoporosis and osteopenia, there are lots of things that you can do to actually help both conditions yourself, and more importantly, you can actually prevent both osteoporosis and osteopenia by your diet, exercise and some lifestyle changes. You may never develop it at all if you make a few adjustments. There's no guarantee you're going to develop either anyway, but that will depend on possibly medical issues, family history, and also your general lifestyle, diet and exercise over the earlier years of your life. So what can you do to actually help both conditions? As I say, you can speak to your doctor and you may be offered medication, but you will still be given advice about diet, exercise and lifestyle that will help you. So if we start off with diet, in your diet, you do need to make sure you get enough calcium. And when we think of calcium, we do tend to naturally think of dairy products, but it's not just dairy products that contain calcium. So things like green leafy vegetables and dried fruits, particularly apricots, and things like tofu, they're all good sources of calcium. And it's not just the calcium that you need in your diet, you also need vitamin D in your diet. Vitamin D helps your body to process the calcium, to get the best out of the calcium that you've included in your diet. And foods such as oily fish and also some fortified breads and cereals, they're just examples. Of course, there's lots more foods that contain calcium and vitamin D. It's definitely worth researching them and see what you're including in your diet, or you can add a little bit more of. So vitamin D is really important to help your body to use the calcium where it's needed most. So as we're talking about osteoporosis and osteopenia, then that's in your bones. Your body can make its own vitamin D, and it does that through exposure to sunlight. Obviously, you should never overexpose your skin, don't ever redden or burn, but regular bouts of sunlight, short bouts of sunlight, no more than 15 minutes, and that does depend on the strength of the sun. It also depends on your skin colouring as well. Darker skin takes longer to burn. It also takes longer to make the vitamin D in your body. Paler skin, obviously everything's a little bit quicker. So you make sure you don't burn, and if you can have bouts of 15 minutes at least 3 times a week, every day if possible, then you're helping your body to make its own vitamin D supply. But during the winter months, the darker months, it doesn't matter what country you live in, the climate changes throughout the year. So if you're lacking sunlight, so particularly in the UK, our autumn, winter and even early spring, you don't necessarily get enough sunlight that is strong enough to allow your body to build up its own vitamin D supply. So you may want to add to your diet with supplements. Now, you can add supplements of both calcium and vitamin D. It is always worth speaking to your doctor first, because with any food supplement, you need to make sure you're getting the right amount, that you're definitely not exceeding the recommended amount. So have a word with your doctor about that. Whether you have already developed osteoporosis or osteopenia, or whether you're just trying to protect yourself from that and keep yourself healthy in general, it's definitely worth checking with your doctor to make sure that you're doing the right thing when it comes to supplements. Magnesium is something else that's really important for your bones as well as your general health. And fortunately, a lot of the foods that contain both the calcium and vitamin D do actually contain magnesium. Again, it is something you can have a supplement for, whether you have it in tablet form or whether you choose to use a magnesium spray. Again, it is worth checking that you're getting the recommended dosage and you're not overdoing things and actually having an adverse effect on other areas of your health. Exercise is really important for keeping your bones strong and healthy. You do, again, need to get advice from your doctor if you have had a diagnosis of osteoporosis or osteopenia, to make sure that what you're doing is going to be beneficial to you and is not actually going to increase your risk or worse, cause a fracture or break in your bones. But as a general rule, there's 2 kinds of exercise that are really beneficial for your bones. So there's weight bearing exercise and resistance exercise. Weight bearing exercise means that you are bearing your own body weight. Your feet and your legs are bearing your own body weight. So things such as walking, running, dancing, even doing gardening and doing your housework, cleaning your house from top to bottom, anything you're doing that's a physical activity where your feet and legs are bearing your own body weight is a weight bearing exercise. They're all beneficial for keeping your bones strong. Then there's also resistance exercise, which involves pushing and pulling and lifting. So you can lift weights, you can incorporate handheld weights into your exercise regime, but also even general things you do. Gardening is another one of those things that you end up pushing and pulling and lugging and lifting. It doesn't necessarily have to be exercise in the sense of doing a DVD or going to the gym, but any lifting and lugging and pulling, even simple things like doing push-ups, they're all resistance exercises, and again, they're really good for your bone health. There are a few things I need to point out. These are the things where you always feel like you're being told off, and believe me, I'm not telling you off, I'm just pointing them out. So excessive alcohol consumption and excessive smoking, they really are bad for your bone health. Now, as you've probably gathered by now, I like a nice cold glass of dry white wine, and I am also an ex-smoker. Now, I like to think I'm not the kind of ex-smoker that lectures people about their smoking. I really try really hard not to do that, because from my own experience of giving up smoking, I know how hard that can be. So if you can keep your alcohol consumption to a reasonable level, and if you do smoke and you're not at a point where you want to give it up, or you just don't want to give it up, then if you can reduce the amount you smoke, both of these things, they really do help. You can get advice from your doctor if you are worried about how much alcohol you consume, or you would like to pack up smoking. But I am talking excessive alcohol consumption and excessive smoking. So it doesn't mean that you can't. I mean, whether you should or you shouldn't is a decision for yourself. It doesn't mean you can't, but if you can keep things down to the lowest limit you can possibly manage, then that is really beneficial for your bones as well. So I hope you found the tips helpful. It's definitely worth having a look into more of the foods that you can include in your diet to get your calcium and your vitamin D, and have a look at what you generally do for exercise. See if you can change a few things, or even include a few more extra bits and pieces. Sometimes the resistance exercise is not necessarily something that's just incorporated in your daily activity, so you may well think, well, I need to do a little bit more lifting, pushing, pulling, lugging things around to do my bones a little bit, you know, a little few favours there. So you can perhaps come up with something simple that you can incorporate into your day that can increase the resistance exercise to go along with any weight bearing exercise that you do. It's all definitely worth trying, because if you can prevent these things, it's better than having to try and improve them after you've had a diagnosis of either osteoporosis or osteopenia. Before I go, I would just like to point out as well that both osteoporosis and osteopenia are silent conditions. You don't know that they're happening to you. You can't see them happening and you can't feel them happening. So unfortunately, and unless you experience a problem with your bones, whether you've had an accident and you've ended up with a fracture or a break, you're not going to know that that is what's going on inside your bones. So prevention is always better than cure, and I hope the tips there are helpful for you. Have a think about them, do a little bit of research, and thank you for listening to me. There is a notification bell below the video if you'd like to know when I'm putting any more videos on, and there's a subscribe button there too. See you again soon.